Hi everyone, it's Katie, and today I wanted to talk to you about the ways in which I get to know my decks. So these are some really powerful, fun, interesting, profound exercises that you can do with your decks to get to know them, to learn how to work with them and understand their personality and their approach and their symbolism. The first thing is to just go through the cards, just to look at the images and sit with those images. And I find this most useful when the deck is in order, so I can really see a progression and notice some of the similarities and differences between, like, the suit cards, for example, to notice the progression within the suits or the progression within the major arcana, and to just really sink into those stories that the deck tells. I actually really love the process of putting a deck in order, especially for the first time. For example, if the deck is secondhand and it didn't come in order, I love that process. Not only does it help me establish whether I've got all the cards, but it also is a really quick and easy way to start to, I guess, see how easy it is to identify the cards. You know, are they quite obscure and non-traditional, or are they very traditional and immediately recognizable? That's a really quick way to start to get an idea of what approach you might need to take to the deck, if it is more intuitive or academic, or if it is very traditional and kind of a plug and play sort of deck. This is also the time I will usually decide whether I want to modify a deck, so that might be trimming the borders off, or edging the deck in ink to color the sides of the cards. Those are pretty much the two things that I will do. Modifying the deck in whatever way that you choose to, and deciding to do that, can be a really interesting way to kind of interact with the cards. Not only does it take time, so therefore you're just spending time with your cards, but it's also personalizing the deck. I feel like it's really an intimate relationship, you know, really kind of deciding that this deck is so much yours that you're going to change its nature. That's a really interesting sort of concept to play with. The next thing I will usually do is something I've recently done a video on, and that is a deck interview spread. So basically the short and sweet version is that I do a spread, a reading, where I ask the deck a few questions about itself and how our relationship might be best approached. I actually did a video going through that spread and giving an example reading, so I'll leave that link below if you're interested. It's a wonderful way for me to really start a dialogue with my deck, and I love interviewing my decks for the first time. I think it's a beautiful experience, and it really does start to create a personality for me in my mind of the deck. I love personifying my decks. You'll often hear me talk about their personality and things like that in my reviews and whatnot. And so that's really like the first step of that personifying the deck, which is a really powerful sort of experience for me in terms of developing a relationship with a deck. It's easier for me to do that when I personify it. The next thing, which you might hear quite often as a suggestion, is a daily draw or a daily spread. The idea is basically that once a day, or perhaps more times a day, you sit down and draw a card, or it might be a 3-card spread, and ask a question specific to your day. That might be, what can I focus on today? What's the lesson for today? I think a daily draw is a really good way to get into a habit of using your decks, but also into a flow of getting to know one particular deck. Another thing I love to do is word associations. So I will write down all of the cards, just list them on a page or two, and then shuffle my deck and then draw one card at a time and write down the first word that comes to mind. So that's a really fun kind of game to play with yourself, and it kind of really gets you back to that intuitive, snappy reaction response. What's your response to the deck, to the cards? Another great way to get to know a deck is to assign different things to the cards or even the suits. So for example, you might assign a character from a book or a TV show or a movie to a particular card. A lot of people find this very helpful for getting to know the court cards, but you can do it for any card. Another one might be to associate a song or a poem with a particular card. A really simple example that I've used before is I'm watching Merlin at the moment, so really kind of seeing the Emperor in his positive aspect as Arthur, and in his shadow aspect as Uther, his father, is a wonderful example for me to really kind of get to know the meaning of that card. And obviously different decks might kind of invoke different stories or characters. And not only can that help you get to know the personality and the story of the deck, it can also help you learn and remember the meanings of the cards and the nuances of different deck meanings. The next two go hand in hand. That is reading the guidebook, if there is one, or the little white book, and using spreads from the book. Now, not every deck will come with a guidebook or even a little white book, and some people really aren't into reading the books, but I personally find it really beneficial. I don't rely on the books, but I do read through them once. That's just a really good way, I think, to get to know not only the personality of the deck, but the approach that the artist or the author was taking. It can really help you pick up little nuances. Often there is a lot more story and really intention and purpose behind the cards than you might assume at first glance. So I really enjoy reading through the guidebook, even if it's just a skim. And most guidebooks will include some custom spreads that are specific to the deck. Pretty much all of them will include like a Celtic cross or a 3-card spread, but often there are spreads that are very specific to the theme perhaps of the deck, and I think it's a really great way to kind of dive into the whole experience of the deck and this creation of the deck by using 1 or 2 of these spreads and just kind of seeing what comes up. Another great exercise is to go through the deck and kind of separate the deck into cards that you love, cards that you hate, and cards that you're pretty kind of neutral about. It's interesting, one, to just kind of see how many cards fall into each category, but it's also really, it can be very powerful to then consider why those cards fall into those categories, especially I think the ones that you hate. Why is it, or hate is perhaps a strong word, although that might be sometimes applicable, but I guess the cards that you have an uncomfortable or negative reaction to. And then really journaling is a powerful thing. Journaling or just considering and contemplating, why is it that you find that card in particular uncomfortable? Is it the imagery? Is it too violent? Is it grotesque? Or is it perhaps too surreal and not grounded in reality enough? That sometimes gets me. There's lots of different reasons cards might be uncomfortable or unpleasant to you, and it's really interesting to kind of sit with those feelings and try to kind of place them. Where are they coming from? And that might help you kind of come to terms with the card, or it might help you develop a different understanding of the card, a different nuance. The next couple can go hand in hand or separately. Those are ritual, pathworking, and meditation. So they can be very, very basic. They can be sitting down and just kind of looking at the card, or it can be a very elaborate cleansing and blessing and consecration of the deck. It can be just spending some time sitting down and looking at it. It can be meditating with a single card and its meaning. There's lots of different ways to interact with your cards, and ritual, pathworking, and meditation can be really powerful ways to do that. A lot of decks have quite strong themes, so if your deck has a theme, it might be interesting to do a bit of reading or research around that theme. So that might be, if it's a fairy deck, for example, you might want to get to know a bit of Fae mythology or Fae story. That might help you kind of connect with the deck a little bit better. If it's a vampire deck, you might want to kind of have a better understanding of what vampires have meant historically. That might be fun. If it is an historic deck, you might want to kind of look into where it originated in the world and when, under what kind of cultural circumstances did it originate. That might really help you tap into its creation and its purpose. Some decks will also have recurring themes or recurring characters. So if you look through, particularly in the suits, this often happens. There's a number of decks that I have, for example, the Mystic Fairy. There's recurring characters throughout the suit cards. So kind of looking at the cards and establishing why are these particular characters or symbols recurring throughout these cards. What does it mean? Do they tell a story, or are they there for comparison to highlight differences within the cards or similarities? Looking at similarities between the cards or things that are recurring throughout the deck can be a really interesting kind of way to start to tap into the story or the symbolism of the deck. Another exercise, which I guess is a little bit more study based but can also be very fruitful and interesting, is comparing it to the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, for example, or if it's a Thoth based deck, compare it to the Thoth deck. and see where the artist or the author has chosen to remain true to that imagery or that symbolism, or where they've chosen to diverge, what they've chosen to do differently, and start to think about, if there are differences, why are there differences? Why did the author or the artist decide to make that change, and what does it mean for you in terms of your readings and how you connect to the card? Often you'll see very small changes, and sometimes those are the most interesting ones to really delve into. Those really kind of subtle, nuanced changes can often be the most meaningful and purposeful. So really don't overlook any detail when you're going through this process, because it can be a really, really powerful one. So ultimately it really is just about spending time with your cards, but these are some of the ways in which I choose to do that, with the explicit intention of getting to know my decks, especially in the early stages of my working relationship with them. So I hope you found some of this interesting and perhaps even useful. I'd love to hear of any different ways that you like to spend time and get to know your decks. I'd also love to hear if you have used any of these exercises, how you found them and whether you found them beneficial. Please leave any questions or thoughts in the comments below, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Until next time guys, have lots of fun with your cards and much love. Bye.